Well, we are back for another week of the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where we bring in guests from all over the world to share some incredible leadership knowledge. And today we will be talking about mental wealth and so much more with the great Mike Pagan. So he's going to be on in just a moment. But I'm John Gehring. Also wanted to introduce Dr. Numa Kareem. Great to have her here with us, joining us from Bangladesh. So we are truly worldwide today, where it is evening where she is, it's morning where we are, and I believe it's afternoon where Mike is. So we got everything covered. Coach Jim Johnson also here from right here locally in the Rochester area, as well as that's where I'm from too. So Coach, you have brought along another international guest today. So I'm so excited to get going with Mike and talk about mental wealth and so much more. So Coach, go ahead and introduce Mike.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've had an opportunity to speak across the pond a few times with Mike through Zoom, and he's a very fascinating man. And I think he's going to contribute a lot to our podcast today. So Mike is an expert in helping clients achieve positive mental wealth through building handpicked support networks and helps them with significant performance improvement. Mental wealth comes from the pursuit of your time potential and positive well-being with a committed support group with working with a mental wealth team. Mike is a speaker, an MC, a coach, and an author of 4 books. His approach is not standard. He can be blunt, direct, honest, and open where necessary. Throughout Mike's life, he is involved in sport and coaching. Mike has competed in rugby and has swam the English Channel as part of the fastest men's relay in 2015. And I got to say, Mike, as we welcome you, being I can swim, but I would never try to get in the English Channel. So I admire what you did there. First of all, Mike, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, just for the record, when it comes to swimming, I've got a good battery. I'm not very fast. You see those swimmers, they're sort of really tall, really long and big feet. That's not me. I just keep on going.
That's the Energizer Bunny, which is good. So Mike, you know what? I'm going to delve right into it because we've had, as I said, a couple nice conversations. But can you share? Because I think as a leader, we see a lot of the physical things that a leader does, but often they neglect the mental, which is one of your major expertise. Can you delve in a little bit about what mental wealth and how it can help young leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, mental wealth is clearly a play on the language of mental health. And if you think of it like the yin yang symbol, where mental health is quite often seen in a negative light. So what's the opposite, the polar opposite of that? Well, that's mental wealth. That's an environment that we can invest in. And it's that simple thing. So it's almost like cash to long-term investments. It's sort of one gets used up very quickly, whereas the other one is stuff that we can really invest in and support. And when we get into that situation of isolation in the workplace, isolation in our space, then isolation kills creativity and prevents decision making. And as a result, that will lead into procrastination and potentially lead into a negative spiral of poor mental health. So when we get good people around us that are fit for purpose for the way forward, and we understand who's good for us and who needs to be replaced or upgraded, then you can get into that position where we are positively, proactively looking after our mental wealth. And there's so many ways of doing that, but that just gives you an overview. I'm not a mental health expert. I don't focus on sort of the mental health challenges and intricacies there. I bring in trained counselors and supporters and everybody else in the mental health world to support that side, because clearly we feed into there. But it's making sure that, right, when we're doing this well, when we proactively invest in our well-being, our mental wealth, and everything that goes with it, we will have a lot more fun along the way. And that's one of my priorities in life. We've got to enjoy it.
Yeah. And Mike, you're so correct about when you are enjoying your time with the team, then work is also not work. And often we are listening from my friends and different colleagues at different organizations that they are burnt out. They're stressed, they're burnt out, they're not enjoying, they're looking forward to the weekends, they're not enjoying the work. And one of the reasons that you mentioned that they all seemed isolated in their own world. So what are your some advice, like if I'm an employer or somebody who is in charge, what should they do in the administration to create that atmosphere where you can build a team and everybody enjoys working with each other?
It's you're not going to switch on positive leaders straight overnight. There's always going to be clashes, and that can be down to chemistry, it can be down to location, it can be down to the right fit for the role. But when it comes to sort of just first things first, we have to press that pause button and understand who is in our support network, who's there. And the classic example I'll always use is whether you're a C-suite executive, a new employee coming in on the bottom row of the organization, or a solopreneur. One of the biggest challenges is you will never tell a stakeholder, somebody above you, that you don't know the answer. You're never going to share with the co-director, I'm not sure what to do next, or a colleague potentially. Your husband or wife will always have your back because they love you no matter what, hopefully. Your friends in the sports club or whatever it is will always say, "I'll just go for it, Mike," because you always land on your feet, which is obviously lovely to hear, but not what you need to hear. And you're never going to tell a direct report or an employee you're not sure what to do next. So suddenly, at different levels within business and different levels in our personal lives, we find ourselves completely isolated from proactive, strong, supportive advice and challenge from people that we're comfortable with, that we've given permission to for them to do that. And when I ask people to subjectively score and understand who is in their inner sanctum, in their support network, they quite often are turning around realizing, well, they're an acquaintance, they're a loose friend. Actually, that's one of my best friends, but I will never tell them about my financial challenges. I will never tell them about my personal fears. I will never be open, honest, and vulnerable with them to that point of intimacy and mental nakedness. And that is where those are people that are in your inner sanctum, in this mental wealth team, as I refer to it, because those are the people you've given permission who will challenge you, and they'll turn around and say, yeah, you're doing that thing again. You've said that before and you didn't see it through. All of these things, and without those people around us, we make poor short-term thinking decisions. We make rash decisions, or worse still, we make no decisions at all, which means we've accepted the status quo. And that can be just as problematic.
Exactly. And yesterday, like a few days ago, I experienced this with my team, where one person in the text talked about something from his personal angle, which did not have any direct attack to anybody, but the other person read the message in a different way. So there was this crisis emerging. So I had to call both of them and say that talk to each other, see where the gap is, because I want a team before the program who can work together, trust together, and enjoy the time together. So once
you touch on it, one of those, sorry to jump in, you touch on one of those really annoying traits that we have of our communication styles nowadays, when a small sentence in a whatever social media message can be so wrongly interpreted, even though there's no malice behind it, but you said this and this is what I heard, whereas you said this and I heard something entirely different. And it's because it's in text, and it's across boundaries, across borders, across countries and oceans. One word over in the UK means something entirely different in the US, and even also in Bangladesh. And so just pick up the phone and talk.
And after that, both of them realized that they were like making like a hill out of nothing. And then everything worked out. So I think this is why personal communication is so important to build a team. It's texting is, but people are so comfortable now just texting instead of talking to each other.
Definitely. Yeah. It's an area where we've just gotten lazy. We've gotten comfortable. I have 3 adult children, and if you ask them to ring a takeaway shop, they can't do it. They need an app to do that. They won't pick up the phone and ring and say, can we have, no, there's an app that does that, and we'll get points if we use that app, and then we get a free pizza next month. Oh, Far
Oh.
too complicated.
10 years maybe, but yeah. Mike,
Yeah, valid. Yeah, thanks for the correction there, John.
I'm curious, Mike, switching gears a little bit, because you talk about a big part of mental wealth is resilience. That's one thing you obviously had to have built if you swam the English Channel. I actually just looked it up because I was curious. The English Channel at its narrowest is about 21 miles long. So that means you swam at least 21 miles without stopping, right? So that's
there is one word in the introduction that you missed. This was the fastest men's relay team.
Yeah.
got
in
it.
2015.
Okay.
So that meant I was a team of 6. So I'm mad, not stupid, or stupid, not mad. I can never quite remember which way it goes. But yeah, so I haven't done the solo, but I have done half that distance anyway as a single swim. So I have done big swims. I have no desire to go back and do that one as a solo.
Okay, good. Thank you for the correction there. Woo! I almost thought we were talking to a madman here. Regardless, that's quite the swim. I mean, I'm picturing swimming across the Genesee River for our local listeners here, which isn't quite the same, or maybe the Erie Canal, which I feel like I could do, or a pool. But this is a little bit different. So obviously, you've had quite the experience as an athlete there, and then also your rugby experience too, and coaching. So your sports background, could you talk a little bit about how that helped influence you writing your books and now what you do as a speaker?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always describe myself as a sports person who never quite made it to the elite level. And for reasons I joked earlier that I'm not as tall as some people. My rugby career, when rugby went professional, I got the tap on the shoulder. I was told I had to put on another 15 kilos of muscle. And I was quite a lot bigger than I am nowadays, and grow 6 inches. Yeah. So I was at the top of my talent range, and I was fully aware of that. But I was happy with that because I had no expectations of making a career in that. However, the other side of that, though, through my career, I have spent time working with professional sportsmen and women as they transition to their life after sport. So that whole environment where yesterday I was in the basketball court, I was on the track, I was in the pool, whatever. The guillotine comes down, and that career is over for whatever reason. You get broken, you get old, you lose form, you lose favor, and so on. And so there were 35 people keeping you fit for purpose yesterday. And from everything from strength, nutrition, mental, everything that's going on there. And then all of those 35 people are now no longer fit for purpose for the way forward. So you suddenly feel this absolute pain of isolation. And the only similarity to this is when people come out of the military. And they're sort of that whole team, that whole network that was around them, that was their kin, their family, is then over. And most of these sports people, whilst they weren't A-listers I was working with, were all professional. They trained for anything between 7 years and 17 years or 27 years. And now they want to build this new career. They've got to find this new direction, knowing full well they're a depreciating asset. So that what fame they have is getting lower. None of them wanted a career job. They didn't want to go and sit in an office. All of them wanted some portfolio career. And their network around them, while some of them were brilliant people, others were just drains. And it's knowing that process that so much of throughout life we transition. So whether you're transitioning from a professional sports person into your new life, or you're transitioning from a school child to a college child, going into your first apprentice job, into your graduate programs, into your first property, you're renting, moving out of home, moving in with a partner, all these things, we transition multiple times throughout our lives. And it's that point when it's pressing the pause button as we transition to realize that other things need to evolve. So a classic example that people are doing at the moment is realizing that pre-COVID is 3.5 years ago now, just putting that timeline there. But it's many years ago. And in that environment, there were people that were in our networks and our support team 3-4 years ago that are absolutely not fit for purpose going forward now. And this is not me saying you've got to dump these old friends and move them on. What's the 2.0? What's the 3.0? What's their upgrade version look like? So that we've got the right people around us will enable us to achieve more, be focused more, have more fun, because we're doing the stuff that we like, rather than just flogging it and knowing, this isn't working, there's something missing. And that's where the key part of having the constantly evolving inner sanctum. Those people have to evolve because you are evolving yourself.
Mike, I'm going to delve into that a little deeper because you struck my curiosity. Is that, and certainly, you know, with young leaders, people getting started, and we know that mental health, mental wealth has been a real struggle. And I assume when you go into a bigger position where you have more responsibility, that can be really a burden if you don't surround yourself to the right people. So what suggestions would you give to someone that now came into a position where they have more responsibility, to surround themselves with what you call the mental wealth team? What suggestions would you give that person, helping them get the right people on their team to help them?
A key thing in that environment is making sure you have somebody external that you can talk to. Because a lot of organizations, they're great on the succession process, but then as soon as Bob starts in the new role, they're abandoned. And for quite a period of time, Bob will be feeling like an imposter because they've been promoted above their original colleagues, or they're new into the company and they're fresh meat. So they're nervous or apprehensive. They haven't built that support around them yet, and that needs to be provided by companies to help people settle in, to help build it. In the same way, if you've got somebody that you're looking at being stepping up over the next year, 2 years, likewise, they need to have that support, because those are the proteges. And the proteges are the people you categorically do not want to lose from an organization, because they're the future leaders. And there's a difference between a protege and somebody who's done time, because when we over promote beyond competence, there's a very different issue that kicks in to promoting because of potential, and we've invested through that journey, so they're there for it. So categorically, it's helping those people support, build that support, talking. An external coach is always going to be very useful, but if that's not in the budget for that organization, then it's finding mentors, finding another co-director in a different silo entirely, and getting them to take responsibility for looking after a couple of the proteges, a couple of our new middle managers, because that way they get that confidence, they get that that dialogue, but they also get a different lens from within the organization that will help them grow far quicker.
Like, I got one more, I got to piggyback on that. Just changing the question slightly. Okay, you are a leader. That now, because not all leaders, when they get in positions, get to choose their teams, but some do. And for me, as a basketball coach, I did. That was something I had complete control. But what advice would you give to a leader that is trying to pick team members to, go for this goal, cause, whatever it happens to be? What advice would you give that person?
It's the key bit there is they have to do it their way. And I know sometimes that will fall out in certain organizations, but that means you've recruited badly or you chose badly as the employee. And when we do it that way, in that environment, you are then dictating the culture. And so if your culture is one of micromanagement and pushing and bullying and beating with a stick, then you're going to lose good people, and the next generations won't join. The Gen Z, the millennials, won't go into an environment where there isn't a clear sustainability process. There isn't clear corporate social responsibility, all of those areas. Well, I don't want to be there if they don't care about the planet. It's as simple as that. That's just not going to happen. And then as you work in that environment, if as a leader, you are showing great practice in well-being and self-care. Self-care for me is one of the primary foundations, because if we're looking after ourselves, then we are fit for purpose for helping other people. And if the leader is burned out, exhausted, turning up late, turning up early, just doing the presenteeism side of things, then they're not setting a positive example on how that needs to work. And just to flip one further on that, and this is really evident now in the hybrid working world, because we're now in 3 and 2 or 2 and 3 on average. It's great, and I think it's going to stay. However, it needs a lot more thinking behind it of culturally within organizations, Because if you're one of the young people working from your parents' spare bedroom with your fluffy slippers on, your cat on the bed next to you, the Netflix on the other screen behind you, and your mum popping in every 20 minutes with a cup of tea to see if you're okay, that is not a professional mindset. And I am not going to get pearls of wisdom from Rahuma having a conversation with a client, an employee, whatever it is, and just learning via osmosis. So this hybrid working is great, but it's also bringing in unintentional isolation, which is especially in matrix organizations that are based at long distances. So geography, you're never really going to meet up. Then we need to really make sure the co-working online and everything else like that is put in place so people aren't cut off.
Yeah, and when we are not meeting, we don't know the vibe of each other. We cannot connect, because when two people meet, there are some chemicals, human chemicals that is being exchanged. There's some energy that we miss when we are talking through Zoom. But I have to ask you a question before I ask my other question. So, are you watching the World Cup cricket tomorrow? With New Zealand?
I will have that on, of course. There's a certain team in the country where I live that are hoping to retain. They're going to be stepping up. It should be interesting. There's always shocks in the cricket world.
I know, and that's what I love cricket. I cannot talk with my co-host on cricket. They don't watch cricket. They're Americans.
Cricket.
Yeah. They swing the bat at that height, not at that height.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question is, I read your article on the 5 strategies you were recommending on managing social media. And I think this would be so useful for our viewers, because all of us are now navigating through social media, now there is Twitch and this and that. And I see people being disconnected because they're scrolling like into the rabbit hole, not connecting even when we are in a community space. So what were some of if you could share your 5 strategies on navigating through social media for our viewers?
For me, navigating through social media it's without listing the 5, because they're not jumping out of my head at the moment in that listed number, but I'm sure you'll post that link in the show notes so people can find it. But for me, it's that whole balancing point. And when the statistics out there nowadays say 8 to 14 hours a day people spend in front of a screen. Now, whether that be a little screen, a big screen, a TV screen, or some sort of iPad or whatever it is, and that, however you want to dress that up, is not healthy. It's not healthy for our eyesight. It's not healthy for us going forward. And so when it comes to that social media piece of how often we do that, it's knowing how much time are we actually spending there. I have in the UK, we have a lovely bit of terminology called faffing around. Which is sort of, it's just basically using up time, not achieving things because we're just being busy doing stuff that doesn't matter. And it's faff. It's the false art of feeling fulfilled. That's actually the title of my first book I wrote. But it's that understanding where we are hemorrhaging time, energy, and effort. So if it's on social media, then all right, it's knowing, okay, I'm looking these guys up that I've just had a conversation with, and now I realize that Jim was at school with my mum's best friend's sister's wife's dog or whatever, and it's sort of you're in that, and within no time at all, we've just lost hours. We've lost hours, and for me, one of the biggest challenges, and I always like to share this story at some point when I'm in a conversation. And it's do not text, do not tweet, do not just share some sort of meme or whatever else with friends. If your gut feel is saying you haven't communicated with somebody recently, then pick up the phone. Better still, if you live locally, go and see them. We do not know what is going on inside somebody else's world at that time. And it is our duty as positive humans to pick up the phone and make that contact. And the reason why I say this story is it was 2 years ago. My youngest son, who is a young adult now, but in his final year at school, one of his close school friends was fortunately unsuccessful in a suicide attempt. The morning afterwards, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call through from one of my best friends who lives in Pennsylvania in the States. And I said, before we chat, Bok, why have you rung me? and he thought that was a bit of a weird way to start a conversation. We talk every month or two, things like that. And we spent 5 minutes fishing around, trying to work out why had he rung. And the conclusion was nothing, just intuitive gut feel said to ring. And the reason why I tell you the story is because he's the head of A&E at a big hospital in Pennsylvania. So I was able to talk through with him everything this young man had done. I could then give all that feedback back to my son, who passed it on to his friend's twin sister and parents. And they got answers via me that they would never have got. He was ringing me at 5 o'clock in the morning, US time, on his way back from a shift at work. So it was one of those complete curveballs. So when we talk about social media and how we need to be more effective on what we manage and whatever, yeah, there are things that absorb us, whether it be Facebook, X, whatever the particular framework is that you're on. But pausing and understanding somebody has gone off radar. Somebody's not in a good place. That FOMO thing is fed via social media constantly. So switch it off. Have absolute pockets of peace and quiet without it on, so you can then do it. Get that social media, get the emails only synchronizing 2 or 3 times a day. All of these are simple productivity tips and techniques, but we don't do it, which means we're constantly being hounded by noise and inputs coming in. And that's why our brains can't switch off, which means we don't get the clarity, which means we don't get those wonderful brain curveballs with wonderful ideas that, innovation, creativity, that would be nice. Well, you're constantly getting rammed with other information. Yeah. We haven't got time for it.
Yeah. And that's what I see. Like when my nephew, I take away his phone, and then suddenly he's making sculpture, he is making animated figures and this and that. His creativity is boosting. But if he's on the phone, he's just scrolling from one thing to another, and the creativity is gone. And I deliberately have a timer on my phone, like after 10 o'clock, I cannot access any sort of social media app. My iPhone will just shut me off from there.
If you have any specific social media elements where you are overusing, let's put it that way, it's not addicted. Yeah. It is. Then just, you can put the half-hour timers on for a day.
Right.
Or 20 minutes. And suddenly you realize there's another app out there. It was called Rescue Time. There are far more up-to-date versions. And that would send you a report at the end of the week, which was scary.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. Right. And this takes me back to another story. I did some wonderful work with a young man in the UK who sadly passed from cancer. But his whole thing was nobody can buy me more time. I can only achieve more with the time I have left. And he was 19 years old, and during that interview, he was coughing up a tumor. He was in a terrible way, but his story was just totally resonated, and it's sort of that 86,400 seconds per day, those 160 hours per week that we all have. No, the really successful people don't have more time. They just don't mess around with any of their time. And it was just sort of that reality check of just, pause. I need to remember that looking after my well-being, my mental health, my mental wealth, if I am doing right by me and I'm not sort of putting pressure, I'm not putting myself in a procrastination bubble where I'm forcing myself to work through the night because I've had a 4-week build up and I didn't do anything. We've all done it at times, hopefully not too often, because it gets very stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike, curious about something else, because we've been talking a lot about isolation and how we can overcome that. And that's a lot of what you do in your work. Now, one thing I know by visiting your website is that you're very passionate about mastermind groups as well. And you also, I know you host a mastermind group too. Could you talk a little bit about the benefits of mastermind groups and why that could be such a powerful tool for young and emerging leaders, especially?
Absolutely. For me, masterminding is so powerful. It was one of those foundation elements of building a mental wealth team. And for me, I'm sorry, Rahum, you're going to enjoy this story more than the other two. Masterminding was not invented in America. Just saying. Okay. No, it wasn't. Yep. Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. No. Long time before that. In the 1760s in the UK, there was an organization called the Lunar Society that was set up, It had original members like Erasmus Darwin and Matthew Bolton and other people like that. And they had to meet under the light of the full moon, because the discussions they were having were borderline heresy and pushing the boundaries of the Industrial Revolution at that time. So they were creative thinkers getting together, non-competitive or collaborative, challenging each other. And when you get a mastermind group working properly, it's the foundation rules are everything that goes on in this room is in total confidentiality. So this is not a friendship circle. Friendship circles are great, but they're for different things. So the mastermind group. So rule number one is everything in confidentiality. Then that gives people permission to be open, honest, vulnerable, and mentally naked with the other people in the room. And then once you've had your time in the spotlight and the other 4, 5, 6 people have been consultants for you, you then commit to, these are the 3 things I'm going to do before we next meet. And believe me, if you're doing them at 2 a.m. on the morning before the next meeting, that's okay. You just don't turn up having not done it. That accountability piece is so powerful. So if you're meeting monthly, suddenly you've got 36 actions over a year that you've committed to that might have taken you 1, 2, 3, 4 years to get round to doing. And some of them will evolve and some of them will move on, but you're always feeding back. And that accountability is so powerful. So young people coming into the new working world and how they can either join other people's paid mastermind groups if it's supported by the organization where they've got time and budget for that, or they create their own. And my first mastermind group I set up, I chose 3 people that I respected, that I wanted to spend more time with, and I knew full well that I wouldn't lie to about stuff I was doing because I knew they'd call me out.
Hey, Mike, did you find with the mastermind group when you start I don't know how long ago you did that, because obviously we do a lot, on virtual now, like we're doing today. Have you found the masterminds more effective if they actually meet in person, or have you found it doesn't really matter?
I think they're just different. Because obviously meeting in person is a far greater commitment. Because obviously you have travel involved and everything else around that. So instead of it just so there's different ways we can do masterminding. One is you meet on a monthly basis, face to face. You have a day, hour and a half per person, 5, 6 people in the group, things like that. If you're doing it on Zoom, then that can be half a day because you don't have all the travel time, and then it's pulling it. The other one I find really useful is retreats. So you're meeting up quarterly or 3 times a year, and that suddenly becomes an intense 2-3 days, 2 nights, staying at somebody's house, staying in an Airbnb or equivalent, but you're then offbeat. But the whole process of it, though, is you are open, honest, vulnerable, getting people to really ask great stuff, and then as a result of it, taking action. Because if we don't take an action, then it's just a friendship circle and your ego strokes, and that's nice, which is fine in that environment. But if you're trying to grow and you're trying to go forward as a young person, recruiting a good team around you, getting them to bring an extra person in, then you really build it.
Mike, my final question, and I really appreciate your great wisdom. Tell us more with your book, The Mental Wealth. What was your goal for the readers that are looking to read this book? What would be 1 or 2, maybe 3 takeaways you would really want the reader to get from reading your book, Mental Wealth?
Thank you. Great question. One of the things I was asked before I started writing the book was, who's this for? It was a challenging question because there are so many tips, techniques, and ideas in there that can work with people who are challenged with their mental health, through to people that are just trying to focus and grow, become more performance related, more productive. Whilst I was writing the book, I sadly lost a friend to suicide. The reason why I tell you that story is because that created this incredible avatar of who I was writing for. Someone who was isolated, someone who was not good at asking for help, someone who was struggling. He personally was going through an ugly divorce, was estranged from his son, and COVID was around as well at that time. So it sort of there was a lot of things spiraling. And he did have people around him, but obviously just having that one person asking the right question at the right time in the right space could have made the difference. I'm not saying it would have, I'm saying it could have. So that gave me this avatar. And when you're dealing with the isolation piece, it can get to the extremes of severe depression and severe mental health challenges. But the other part of it is when we're not able to ask for help because we're scared of looking stupid. We've got our brave pants on and we're just going gung-ho. We need the external view of other people at times. One of my greatest errors in business over the years was when I bought some overseas property back in the mid-noughties. And long story short, I had spent a few $100s, pounds, euros, whatever currency you want to call it, on independent external advice. It would have come back and said, run, Mike, run. Instead, I didn't do that. And it's cost me over $250,000 in lost money that's been spent on all over the place. And I've still got this property in the middle of nowhere where it shouldn't have ever been built, with bad building. The list goes on. It took me a lot of years to be able to talk about that publicly. But for me, that just reinforces that professional network, that professional part of our mental wealth team, where they are able to ask emotion-free professional questions, having read the small print, having understood my small print of where I'm trying to grow my wealth and my business and my life and my everything else. They're able to do that because they can turn around and say, yeah, you say you want to do this, but you're doing that. That doesn't work. So that would be one, is building that professional support network around you. The other is always going to be building the mastermind team. Because if we've got that, and suddenly you've got 5 or 6 people or 7 people that have really got yours. And obviously self-care. When we put ourselves as priority number 1, we are allowed to be selfish. And it's not about children where you can't share your toys with Johnny. That means you're selfish. Yeah, this is the other side of selfish, looking after you. I have always jokingly described myself as number 6 in my family. Wife, 3 kids, and a dog, and
the dog.
Yeah, well, no, Christmas before last we had puppies, so I was actually number 14. But it's joking aside, if I'm not number 1, then I can't be fit for purpose when the others have a challenge. If I'm not doing the stuff that rebuilds my well-being, that strengthens my character, I can't do mindfulness and meditation. Right. I just don't sit still. It doesn't work for me. But what I discovered through my open water swimming and all the work I do there is stroke after stroke after stroke just becomes that repetitive. So it's the same as going for a long walk or climbing a mountain or going on a dirty great big bike ride. And you tune out. I have never gotten out of water, cold water, open water, feeling worse than I did before I got in. And so for me, absolutely it works. And that's part of investment. And I realized there's certain parts of the world where you have these sort of long fish with big teeth and other things like that, or scaly beasties that's alligators and whatever. It's not always convenient, but it's what is the interpretation of that for each person. Yeah, we're all individuals. So it's knowing what is that interpretation? What can we do that proactively looks at our welfare? And if it means we need to investigate nutrition, get a PT, get some sort of fitness going, if that's what we need. If that's not your thing, all right, then what do you do to reboot? I always say, especially for solopreneurs or small businesses, go to a coffee shop, but make sure it's a sanctuary coffee shop. And for me, a sanctuary coffee shop is one with an upstairs, because the strollers and the pushchairs can't go upstairs. Right. Just saying.
Right, and then that makes sense. Mike, it's awesome to talk to you, but my last question to you about impact, meaningful impact, finding a meaning in your job. When I'm talking about these things, many of my friends and relatives laughs at me and say, the job is job. You're not supposed to be happy and find meaning in your work. You just go there to earn money, and that's it. If you try to find meaning, then you will be upset and depressed and all these things. But you talked about, like, you experienced a low point in your career, and then you found your meaning. Could you elaborate a little bit, like why meaning was so important? Finding meaning was so important for you.
It's one of those areas. I think back to the conditioning of me through my family life and my parents, and I had very involved, very proactive, good parents. So I haven't got a tragic story that of where that came from. But when I first started working in the speaking world and the coaching world, my father said, "Yeah, but when are you going to get a proper job?" Yeah, just did not compute that this by any way was proper. And it's in that world that, so you're thinking, because of the personal conditioning, the script, as a colleague of mine calls it, you've been given, is there that you need to be performing in a certain way. So if you're putting bottle tops on, then that's a physical job. It's visible. We can understand it. And that's not the reality that works for so many of us. And so for me, what I landed up understanding, and it comes back to, again, with the latest book, that we were talking about the branding of what it should look like, and what the title should be of the book, and how that all comes together. And there were just debates with the publishers saying you can't use the language mental wealth because people will stick it in the finance shelf. And it's well, yeah, but I appreciate it needs an explanation, but that's the point. Yeah, that's what makes it different. And then they said, well, what does mental wealth mean to you? And I described a lot of the things I do. Yes, I'm a weekend warrior. I'm not an extreme adventurer, but I do silly stuff, and I'm very active. And they turned and said, you live your brand. This is you. The more foolish, stupid, wild things you do, this is you. You got these pictures around me you can see on the screen. The two of those are from Vancouver. They're laughter statues, and from a business trip I did. The others are from a place in Poland called Wrocław, where they have these little brass dwarfs. There's 300 of them, all positioned all around the city. But whenever I speak at a conference, where possible, so it's not always, but where possible, I always have a day after the conference to decompress, because that way you clear, you sort, you do everything else. And as you can see from these pictures, I go walkabout. I love exploring. I lived in Australia for a number of years. I've traveled extensively. So that for me is really powerful. So this is, I live mental wealth. Yeah, that is what I do. And so to actually create a lifestyle, create business, feed coaches, feed other peer support people all over the place and internationally. So it's not just me in the middle of England. It does go globally. Then that really does resonate and puts a smile on my face. And my children see me practicing what I preach, whether it be from fitness and stupidity there, or just having a laugh. We've got to do more of that.
Yeah, I think young and emerging leaders can definitely resonate with what you're saying, Mike. I think we all, we love to travel. We understand, our generation is really into the things that you've just described and how important it is to do those things. So we definitely admire that. And if a young and emerging leader who's listening today is interested in picking up one of your books, you got 4 of them. Could you talk a little bit about what you would recommend someone who's maybe my age, in their 20s, looking to take the next step in their career and life, looking to achieve mental wealth? What book should they start with, and why?
Okay. Obviously, I'd say get a copy of Mental Wealth. It's great because all of my children helped me proofread it. They literally, one of my daughters was going through it. Can't put that in. If you want my generation to read it, that can't go in. Okay. Which is fine. If you want this to be a sustainable book that's going to carry on, and so it was true and honest. I go into the dark side of heavy books, and I know that may be not the answer you're necessarily expecting, but I will balance it with one other. One of my favorite authors at the moment is a lady called Edith Eger, that you may know of in the States. She's based in New Jersey, is she New York? Around there, I believe. But long story short, she's an Auschwitz survivor. She's 95 years old nowadays. And her story is very similar to that of Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. She's written 2 books. The first one was called The Choice, which is all about life as a choice and gives a lot of her story. And the second one was The Gift. And it's about life being a gift. And the chapter headings are brutal. Would you be married to you? Little questions like that, nice subtle ones. And loving the inner Nazi. So they're there to get you thinking. Right. But there was one element in one of the stories, and I have quoted this a few times with other people. She's listening as a psychotherapist to patients coming in, dealing with their trauma or challenges of their misdirected partner and other things like that. And she just got that perfect drop the mic going to, well, it's not Auschwitz, is it?
Right.
And it's kind of, okay, yeah, get back in your box.
Yeah.
So for me, I really do appreciate that, and I am dyslexic, so I'm not a big reader, so I do a lot of audio books nowadays. But in that environment, that one really does resonate. And the other one I'd give you is there's a British professor called Professor Stephen Peters, who's worked with the British Sky cycle team over the years, a number of the rugby players, a number of the snooker players, and others. And his book is called The Chimp Paradox. And again, it's all about the little voice in our head and how we have to entertain that little chimp, because that's the one that's going to sabotage our performance, our focus. So I will literally, I've done this for years, but when I read this book on it, it just put the clarity around it. So I will put on a musical or something like that in the background. So Hamilton is a brilliant musical, putting on for 1-2 hours, but that's entertaining my chimp on the other screen. Yeah, okay, I'm not watching it, I've just got the audio on, which means that the rest of my brain, I'm not schizophrenic. Am I? No, I'm not. It just means, though, that I can then focus and get on with the other thing because the chimp is entertained. And so those are couple of interesting books, but for young people in getting going in their business careers and everything else like that, the sooner we learn the messages within there, the sooner we can be more productive and perform better, because they're simple. I'm a simple kind of guy, so it's the simpler it is, the more likely you are to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Pagan is who we've been talking to today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. You can find more information about your speaking, about your mastermind, about your executive coaching, all up at your website, which I just had it up, and there it is. It's mikepagan.com. It's down in the show notes, though, if you don't want to remember that. But I'd say it's pretty easy to remember. It's mikepagan.com for more information. And I believe, Mike, your books are also up on Amazon as well.
Absolutely, yes. And if you can't get them from there, just send me a message. I can get them across. It's all doable. Yes, where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All those links down in the show notes for you to get more of Mike. And we are certainly excited to dive into some of your other work, Mike. But thank you so much for your time today. You've shared a lot of valuable knowledge with our young and emerging leaders.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.